I want to welcome everyone. This is an important Tele town hall. It's intended to help each of us navigate the CARES Act and how we can help support our business community. This pandemic has disrupted all of our lives, but none more so than the businesses that keep Rocky Mount thriving. David Ferris, the Rocky Mount Chamber of Commerce, and I have partnered with the goal of presenting key information that enables our understanding of the possibilities of the CARES Act to make informal decisions and, most importantly, to get Rocky Mount back to business. And as of April 13th, 2020, more than 1 million CARES Act loans have been approved nationally for a total of $248 billion, and of that, 23,786 loans have been authorized in North Carolina, resulting in the approval of more than $5.7 billion. And David, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add on to that before we introduce our speaker here, Director Stith.
I do, Sandy. First, I want to thank all of the attendees for taking time out of the day. I know we're all watching more and participating in more conferences than probably any time in our professional lives. I feel like maybe a high school student might feel you're always on electronically now. But I also want to thank Thomas Stith. As everyone should know, he has his roots come back to Rocky Mount. He's no stranger here. And I have had the privilege of being on several conferences in the last week or so with Thomas. And I think as a state, and in particularly our region, we are very fortunate. Frankly, we're blessed to have him as part of that team with SBA helping to lead us through here. We are running a survey that Kenneth Hunter helped put together that ask about impacts on your business, any business out there. And we do ask you to complete it. It was released today, and I think the last count, we were just under 50 participants, which is really good. But it gives us a little bit of insight where we can help guide you and help guide the community. But Mr. Mayor, we are delighted to partner with you and in bringing this important town hall meeting to our citizens. So I thank you.
Well, thank you. Of course, as you know, and I appreciate all you're doing. The Chamber is a great asset to our community in building Rocky Mountain. And really, this is about what do we do in a post-COVID-19 world? How do we regenerate businesses that are going? But right now, I think I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our speaker. And so I've had the good pleasure of meeting Thomas through Rivermont Capital and various projects. And as you pointed out, he is no stranger to Rocky Mount, in fact, has roots here with Stith Park being named after family and a long line of entrepreneurs himself. But I think not more importantly, I think in his current role, Thomas A. Stith III is a district director for the SBA North Carolina District Office. And he's been in that role since September of 2019. Oversees an office that drives economic development by assisting local entrepreneurs start and grow businesses. He also directs the implementation of the SBA program relating to accessing capital, business advising, and governmental contracts. Thomas came to the SBA from the Michael Thomas Group, which is a consulting firm he co-founded to advise clients seeking business development opportunities in public and private sectors. Thomas also recently served with the Rivermont Capital, where he was a senior advisor in the areas of investment, development opportunities, and investor relations. Thomas has served as Chief of Staff for Governor Pat McCrory from 2013 to 2017, and as a City of Durham councilman from 1999 to 2007. So with that said, I want to introduce Director Stith to the podium, and afterward I have a few questions that hopefully our audience will ask, and I'll be able to direct those to you, Director.
Sure. Well, first of all, Mayor Roberson, I just want to say thank you for welcoming me home. It's good to be in Rocky Mount, although virtually, and thank David and the Chamber as well for sponsoring this. We're indeed facing challenging times in North Carolina, but as I said, it's always good to feel that you have a home to come to. While I was brought up in Durham, I always consider Rocky Mount home and still do. And so I thought if appropriate, I could give just a little overview of SBA in general and then talk about SBA's COVID-19 response, if that works well for you.
I think that's fantastic. Really do appreciate you coming back. And I think I speak on behalf of David and the rest of the city of Rocky Mount. You're always welcome here.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, SBA's role in general is working with small businesses to start, grow, and expand their operations. And as you mentioned, in those times of disaster, we also involved with recovery. Whether it's a hurricane, Fran, Floyd, or Matthew, SBA is there to provide economic relief for those impacted small businesses. Well, last fiscal year in North Carolina, we focused on 3 areas, and that's capital access, government contracting, and counseling and technical support. We supported over $690 million of guaranteed loans to small businesses. $2.5 billion was awarded to North Carolina-based small businesses with federal contracting. And we have numerous resource partners, from the Small Business Technology and Development Centers to Women Business Centers, that work with small business, along with the Small Business Administration in North Carolina. But clearly, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted not only our national economy, but our North Carolina economy as well. And so, as I kind of chuckled in the beginning, as I'm always the guy in the class that messes up the technology. So I'm going to try to share my screen now and just quickly go through a presentation to give an overview of the SBA's response to COVID-19, and then to, let me see here. Okay. And talk a little bit about SBA's response to COVID-19, and then literally talk about some immediate issues impacting our community now. And just as a check, is there a blue SBA logo on the screen now that you can see?
Yes.
Okay, great. And let me start off with the most recent news, and that was what was announced today. We've had a historic response from SBA and the Treasury to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over $349 billion was allocated to the Paycheck Protection Program. And as of 10 a.m. this morning, $349 billion had been allocated to businesses across this country. In North Carolina alone, as the mayor mentioned, a little over $5.7 billion have been allocated to small businesses, over 24,000 businesses. And as we speak, those funds are currently depleted. So at this point, the Payroll Protection Program is now working with those small businesses that receive those allocations, and they will subsequently be dispersed. And along with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, those programs have, with the Paycheck Protection Program, have depleted their resources. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program has now been temporarily paused because of the response. And we'll talk about that a little more in the presentation. But I just wanted to give the most recent news that now SBA is waiting for Congress to decide whether there will be additional funding for these programs. But let's talk about how we found ourselves in this situation. We clearly know that the COVID-19 virus is a pandemic that is impacting our entire nation and world. On March the 17th, SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza declared all 100 counties a disaster in North Carolina. And as we know, those of us that have ties or live in Rocky Mount now, we understand that we have hurricanes that will see Eastern North Carolina impacted, and we'll have a disaster declaration. So just imagine a hurricane throughout the whole state of North Carolina. So all 100 counties were eligible as of March 18th for disaster recovery loans. And so those, we started the Economic Injury Disaster Loan process. Then following that, on March the 27th, Congress passed the CARES Act. And within that was appropriations for the Paycheck Protection Program and the Small Business Debt Relief. We're going to talk briefly more about the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, but I would like to mention the Small Business Debt Relief Program that was a part of the CARES Act because that provides relief to, there was funding of $17 billion for existing SBA loan holders, whether you were a 7A or 504 loan holder. You will be able to have 6 months of your current loan principal and interest deferred. SBA will actually pay those payments for those existing SBA loan holders. So that is still moving forward. But let's talk briefly about the Paycheck Protection Program. The mission and goal of the Paycheck Protection Program is to provide needed economic support for small businesses, nonprofits, faith community to retain their employees and to provide funding for allowable uses such as utility costs, rent, lease payments. These loans can go up to $10 million for a term of 2 years at 1% interest. But the real incentive within the Paycheck Protection Program was a forgivable clause. And if the loan proceeds that a business was approved for are utilized during the first 8 weeks, and we're saying because, and literally we see today, the limited amount of funding, that at least 75%, if those funds were dedicated toward payroll costs, the other 25% could go toward utility costs, mortgage payments, or lease payments, that the combination of that expenditure during those first 8 weeks, at the end of the 8 weeks, though that amount could be applied to the loan and reduce the required amount that would need to be repaid, therefore forgiving that amount. So as an example, if your loan was $100,000 and you dedicated $75,000 to payroll, $25,000 to mortgage and lease expense, the entire loan would be forgiven. Or if your total expenditures was $75,000 of allowable expenses, you would only have $25,000 that would be needed to be paid within that 2-year period. As a part of that program, the first 6 months of loan payments are deferred. And so that also is another feature, or is a feature of the Paycheck Protection Program to help small businesses, nonprofits, faith-based organizations start to recover from this pandemic. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is modeled after literally disaster response, as we've seen in past hurricanes or forest fires that we have in Western North Carolina. These loans are a maximum of $2 million. Small businesses would have a rate of 3.75% over 30 years, 2.75% for nonprofits or faith-based entities. And these were designed or are designed for operating expenses. So everything from payroll to utilities to accounts payable. Also, as a part of the CARES Act, there was an additional benefit that is included with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and that is an emergency advance. And a borrower could request up to $10,000, excuse me. They would be eligible to up to $10,000 for an emergency grant. And these funds would be paid to the small business or nonprofit. And typically the rule of thumb is $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. But this is in the form of a grant. So small businesses or nonprofit are not required to pay this back. If they are ultimately successful in receiving an economic injury disaster loan, there would not be a requirement for the advance to be paid. If they are not successful in receiving a loan, that advance would not be paid as well. So while both programs are now halted based on funding, as I said, literally today at 10 a.m., the Paycheck Protection Program expended the $349 billion from a national perspective. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan has been temporarily halted for new applications. Existing applications are being reviewed and will be issued based on available funding. I still encourage individual businesses and nonprofits to visit the SBA site for recovery. It's sba.gov/coronavirus, sba.gov/coronavirus, because there's still information available about these initiatives. Congress is still reviewing additional funding, and there is the potential for that, but that's Congress, and I won't venture to say what eventually happens, but we would anticipate a strong support for additional funding because of the success of these programs. With the PPP alone, $5.7 billion has been approved here in North Carolina for about 24,000 businesses. So it has made an impact. There's still significant need, so we would certainly hope for additional funding. In conclusion, as I mentioned a little earlier, SBA has numerous resource partners around the state that have been supporting small businesses, assess what programs are available, prepare them for the loan process. Direct assistance is available from SBA as well, but also individuals can work with their small business and technology development centers, which are located at our universities across the state. We're all working virtually now, but they are available. Our 4 women business centers located in Asheville, Charlotte, Durham, Raleigh, and Fayetteville are available to work with not only women-owned businesses, but general businesses. And our Veterans Center in Fayetteville is focused on our veterans and recovery around veterans. So I'll pause now and give opportunity. I know Mayor Roberson wanted to, and I think very important today, especially because of the occurrence of the funding being exhausted, provide opportunity for question and answer on existing applicants may be involved and maybe next steps as well. And this presentation we can provide for the chamber if you want to post on your site or have as a resource with my contact information. So now I will stop sharing screen and go back to live. And again, want to just say thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Rocky Mount business and nonprofit community today, and look forward to further dialogue.
Well, Director Stith, my take home today is that it's easy to give away money.
Yeah, I started opening up and saying, let me show you how I can spend $349 billion in a week or two, you know.
You know, it reminds me of that movie Brewster's Millions, except he had to come away with nothing of value at the end of it. And I think the point here is that we are creating a great deal of value and helping small businesses survive through this COVID-19. And my bet and hope is that Congress will, in fact, increase it. But we do have a few questions here, if you don't mind me presenting them to you, and perhaps you can answer them. I know applications may be in or maybe not in already, but and maybe they'll open it up. But I think they're still pertinent, and I think folks will still be interested in hearing the answers. I think, well, one of them is, are independent contractors and self-employed covered under the PPP?
Yes, they are. Actually, they're covered under the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So independent contractors and sole proprietors are eligible, or would be eligible if they applied. They were eligible and potentially moving forward.
And so, what would the rate of pay need to be if I were filling out the application? Would it be what my tax return would suggest, or is there some other formula that perhaps would be beneficial to the SBA to see?
Usually, I would tell you to work with your financial advisor, but they would look at typically the net profit. If you're not paying yourself a salary, and those salaries are capped at $100,000 for individual identifying a salary, or they would look at net profit figures typically. So either one of those, depending on how that individual has their compensation structure.
Okay, great. Another question that we have from the audience is, where do nonprofits and churches fit into this relief program?
Nonprofits and churches, faith-based organizations are eligible for both the PPP and the Economic Injury Disaster Program.
Okay, great. Let's see. Here's another question. What happens if you've applied for assistance and already had to lay off employees?
If they receive, that's usually the example, if they receive the Paycheck Protection Program loan, the theme is to employ individuals. So if they had to lay those individuals off, the thought would be that they would bring those folks back on payroll as quickly as possible. So you do have a short time period to either bring those individuals back or hire other individuals. if you wanted to utilize the forgiveness clause, because what will be seen is what is paid on for payroll the 8 weeks following the receiving of that Paycheck Protection Program. So you do have the option of bringing those individuals back.
Okay. Now, another question from our group is, can a business apply for both loans? In this case, I was told if you applied for the PPP first and received the loan, you would be prohibited from applying for the EIDL. Can you only apply for one or both as long as you don't use the funds for the same purpose?
It's the latter. You're eligible for both. You just can't use the funds for the same use. So they would have to be for different uses.
Okay. Can the funds from EIDL be used to pay down or pay off a higher interest credit line?
My general guidance on that is you can pay accounts payable, but I do not believe it could be used to pay off if they're saying complete payoff, but it could be made on those monthly payments in general. Yeah.
Okay. Another question here is for the PPP. The loan can be used for rent, utilities, payroll, but the calculation is 2.5 times payroll. Do we add rent to that box, or do we stay within a 2.5 times payroll?
Right. It is the average, and the most direct calculation would be they would do a 12-month look back, get the average monthly payroll per month, and multiply that times 2.5%. Utilities and rent is not included in the calculation. It's 2.5%, 2.5 times average payroll, monthly payroll.
Okay. Another question is, let's see, are there any prepayment penalties to either of these loans?
No, I don't. The guidance hasn't addressed that. No.
Can't imagine. I see. Another one is rumors say the grant is now equal to $1,000 an employee. Is that correct?
That is correct. The calculation, as they look at that advance, is basically they look at the number of employees, and it will be $1,000 per employee up to $10,000.
I got you. Okay, so and then let's see here. Is there a minimum dollar amount requirement for the PPP loan or the EIDL?
No, there's not a minimum. With the Paycheck Protection Program, the value of the loan is determined by 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan looks at, and as a general rule of thumb, what your operating cost would be for estimate of a 6-month period. So there's no minimum required.
Okay. In this question, we had an event that was planned in May. We had to cancel and refund deposits. And in addition, we've lost all revenue that would have been received from admission or from the event. Can we apply to recover lost revenue in that particular case?
Yeah, that would probably go on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan side, and that opportunity is for businesses that have experienced, as you just outlined, the economic impact because of the pandemic. So they would be eligible for the EIDL.
Okay. Let's see here. So we've got another question. Can you clarify how the EIDL loan applications will be assessed, and what does up to 10,000 mean regarding the advance?
Sure, and on the latter part of that, the up to 10,000 is the emergency advance that is in the form of a grant. The rule of thumb is if approved, it would be $1,000 per employee up to 10,000. On the just the full evaluation, basic financial information is requested as the underwriters and the Office of Disaster Assistance evaluates the small business. By general rule of thumb, they look at it, is there a credit history? There's not a bright line on credit score, but they're trying to see, was this a sustainable business, some level of credit history? Is there ability to repay once the economy normalizes? If the amount of the EIDL is $25,000 and below, there is no collateral required. If it is 25,000 and above, that would trigger the underwriter to look for some level of collateralization. It's not required to have full collateralization, but it would just cause them, and it's not immediate disqualifier, but that would cause for a look for some collateralization of a loan above 25,000.
Okay. Let's see here. One more question so far, and that's, is there a way to get a copy of the EIDL to review prior to completing the online application so that I can have all of the needed information ready and available prior to starting my online application?
Very good question, and that's what we were recommending. And now that the portal has been paused there, but I believe the applications are still posted. You could actually print it off before applying. I would also recommend working with one of our local resource partners, either the SBTDC or Women's Business Center. They also have copies of the hard copy application. But previously, I know before today, you could literally print that off before beginning the application.
Okay. I've got another question here. I'm receiving them from all over the place, so just bear with me here. But the question is, for those who've already applied online for the EIDL, advance and or loan up through this week, will they still receive funding?
Those applications are still being reviewed. They will be funded on the first come, first served basis as they go through the review process. Because of the limited funds, there's the potential that it still will be funded, but it depends on where they are in the review process for the EIDLs, right?
Okay, so then there's a follow-up to that. It says, when you apply online, aren't you applying for both the loan and the advance if you check the box for the advance consideration?
Correct. The online application, they are one and the same. And when I went through it initially, it literally was a box check almost at the end to be considered for the advance. But the advance request is a part of the EIDL application.
Okay, so then I've got another question here, and it says, can the grant amount be used for debt consolidation?
The grant amount doesn't have any restrictions, so
right.
You know, depending on how much you get on the advance, could be utilized.
Okay, all right.
Do you want to take some from the audience?
See, do we have any in the audience? I've got maybe two more questions here, but any of those that are listening want to ask a question, we could, for Director Stith, if you would raise your hand.
Okay.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lee.
Oh, he's got to unmute. You can unmute.
Wait a minute. Well,
Ask him to
unmute. Mr. Lee, can you, we've unmuted you. Can you, let's see here. You say, can you speak?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Director Stith.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right.
All right. We're a staffing business. If I payroll currently and number of employees is less, considerably less than the average monthly payroll computed based on our 2019 numbers. So how does that, I'm just throwing out some numbers. If the amount of the loan was $100,000, but the payroll for the 2-month period was, say, $20,000. The first $20,000 would be forgiven, and the remaining $80,000 would be basically a loan at 1%. Is that correct?
In that example, it would be. You also would have the option of, you would have to utilize at least 75% of your expenditures toward payroll. You could have another 25% of those expenditures toward utilities, rent payment, lease payment, mortgage payment. So you could increase the amount of forgivability depending on how your numbers work to increase that $100,000. also, and I've seen both today, and there's clearly been some unanswered questions today with the expenditure of the funding. Some lenders have been able to, say you qualify for a $100,000 loan, they've been able to reduce that loan amount, but some have not as well within our E-Trans system. So there may be the potential while you qualify for 100,000 and you know your number is 50, you may be able to get a reduction, but that's hadn't been consistent today. So I wouldn't want to steer you wrong. But so in general, in your initial example, the 20,000 would trigger, that portion would be forgiven if it would reach 75% of your expenditures. But you could also benefit from, if you utilize for utilities and rent, and another 25% of that could be reduced as well.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay, I've got a question here. It says, if a business owner gets funds from PPP but is shut down due to a stay-at-home order or some other restriction, or is deemed, I suppose, non-essential from the current list, and doesn't have work for employees, how does that figure into the forgivability of the loan?
I know it's a little counterintuitive, but that is the theme of this, the Paycheck Protection Program, is to provide that paycheck to employees, whether they're literally, as you mentioned, there are some businesses that their employees are at home or that they have let go. And so even those that may not be able to go, if you're paying that payroll, and some businesses are carrying that payroll now. So the guidelines say you can still pay those individuals even if you're not able to go into your business or conduct business, because the mission of the PPP is to provide paychecks, if you please, for employees.
Okay. I've got another question here. And so isn't it correct that state and local employment taxes, health, medical insurance, sick leave and vacation, FMLA leave are all included in the payroll expenses?
Right. It is not only direct compensation, it's health benefit, it's all that you listed, if I'm correct. Well, benefits, vacation leave, so it's your full payroll load. Okay.
Final question I have on this, unless we have some from the audience in the future here, is the confirmation number the same as the application number? So I guess if I've already applied and I've gotten a confirmation number, is that the same as the application number going forward?
Is that the economic injury disaster loan?
Yes, sir. I believe so.
And I had that question earlier today. If they have received, they should, that confirmation number, once applying for the EIDL, should be that same number throughout the process. So that should serve as the application number as well, or loan number as well, from what I understand. Yes.
Okay. Anybody else from our audience here want to raise their hand and ask Director Stith a question?
They can admit themselves.
Okay, it looks like you have done such a thorough job, Director Stith, that nobody has any questions. And so at this point, I suppose I'll turn it right on over to you, David.
Thank you, Sandy. And again, we want to thank all of you who joined us today, and in particular, Director Stith. We thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule to help our community as we work our way through COVID-19. As you and I were speaking before the broadcast, I think it's important that we all realize we're anxious for the funding to come through. We feel confident Congress will pass a $250 billion request that's before them now. But earlier we were talking about the sheer volume and how it relates to, in our world, in our business world, that our local banks, as I've spoken to them, are processing the volume of loans that they would normally do over an 18-month period within a week to 10 days. And it's just it's coming in from every direction. I think the analogy you and I were using was, you're the garden hose and we're now feeding a fire hose into the garden hose, and it just doesn't work. But I do thank y'all for doing what you're doing, and our lenders. And Mr. Mayor, I thank you for helping put this together today. I think it's been very beneficial to our community.
Well, I want to thank you for your help, your expertise. Director Stith, thank you for your infinite knowledge of how this process works, and we'll hope for more recovery funds as we go forward. And just thank you so much. Thank you for all participating.
Yeah, thank you again for having me today, and certainly be open to coming back as we continue to stay engaged with the small business community.
Fantastic. Thank you.